I'm Bethany Craig, and the theory that I've chosen to do for my training module is behavioral theory. Behavioral theory really began, or behaviorism really began being discussed as a theory in the late 1800s. Walsh, in his textbook, Theories for Direct Social Work Practice, believes that three men really set the stage for what is now contemporary behavioral theory. Those men were Wilhelm Wundt, Ivan Pavlov, and Edward Thorndike. According to Logue, John Watson, who was a neurologist and a physiologist, also played into what is now contemporary behavioral theory. Watson believed that behavior should be studied as a natural science, with a person's observable behavior being the data. That is, the things a person does, what a person thinks, and how a person feels that is observable and measurable. There are several assumptions that are important to behavioral theory. According to Walsh, several of the assumptions are that all human behavior is learned and that we behave based on our environment and the things going on in our environment. Additionally, behavioral theory believes that social reinforcements ultimately determine the way that an individual behaves, and that people are naturally motivated by rewards and pleasure and will naturally try to avoid pain, discomfort, or generally bad situations. It's also important to note that behavioral theory is not concerned with the person's mental processes or emotional life, except when those thoughts and feelings affect their behavior. So as a social worker working with a client, that is something that's pretty key to understand. As a social worker using behavioral theory, it's really important to understand that this theory believes that all behavior is learned and people can learn new behaviors to replace old maladaptive behaviors. This can be done in several ways, including classical conditioning, operant conditioning, modeling, and systematic desensitization. And I'll walk through each of those ways in this training module. Probably the most famous experiment using classical conditioning was completed by Ivan Pavlov in the early 1900s, and that's the man that you see here. Classical conditioning is basically where behavior is modified through a manipulation of natural responses. Basically what happens is an unconditioned stimulus, so something that happens or produces a response all on its own, is paired with a conditioned stimulus. The two stimuli are paired together in the hopes that it will, eventually the conditioned stimulus will produce the same response as the unconditioned stimulus. So what Ivan Pavlov did was he had his dogs, and the unconditioned stimulus was the sight of food naturally made his dog salivate. So what he did in his experiment was he paired the sight of food with the ringing of a bell. And he kept those two together until eventually the ringing of the bell produced the same salivation in the dogs.